Hello, class, and welcome to Experience Design 2, Week 5. Today we're talking about user journeys. So I think I already mentioned user journeys in one of my previous classes, but we're going to go over it a bit more depth today. And your next assignment is about user journeys, so this will relate directly to the assignment that you have to hand in. So what is a user? These are the things we're going to cover today in class. What is a user journey? What is a user journey map? How are journey maps useful? User journeys maps. I should check my slides before I publish them. How to make a user journey map, and assignment 3, customer journey with touch points and moments. So what are user journey maps? Um, User journey maps are also called customer journey maps. That's more the old school name for them, sort of pre-digital, and simply just called journey maps. As I've said before, I don't love the term user and to a lesser degree customer, as I believe these terms diminish the total experience of the humans being described. These are the current terms that people refer to them by, so I will use them for convenience sake. But just to go back, I think that, calling somebody a user, it's very convenient to say, and we say it a lot in the industry, so I don't think it's ever going to go away, unfortunately. But to describe a person as a user, I find it very dehumanizing, where we think about them only in terms of what they do and not who they are. And I think to be a good experience designer, we do have to kind of think about who they are as people. Um, and it'll only make us better designers to think about it in those terms. I think that, the term user, not that I think, I know the term user came from computer programmers from like the 70s. And it was just because programmers can be very reductive type people that they refer to uh, copy and writing and copywriting and stuff like that they put into the pages as content, and they call putting that into web pages as populating content, which are very strange terms for it if you think about it. What is content, right? And you see that it even gets used now. People are being called content creators, which I think also cheapens the idea of being an artist or a writer or a designer. You're not content creators that just churn out content, this kind of stuff. You're creating something that's useful and helpful, you know. So I think we need to slowly over time shift these terms. This is a bit of a sidebar and not totally relevant to the discussion here, but I feel very strongly about this. And you'll hear me say user quite often, and it's because I've been talking about this for so many years, it's hard to break the habit. But what I try to do now is I try to refer to them, if I have to refer to them as a group of people, as what they are in the context of what we're trying to learn. So sometimes customer makes sense. If I'm talking to a client and I'm talking to them about a website that people can purchase things from, I'll refer to them as customers because in the context of how we're looking at them, they are customers. But even that seems reductive as well. I think that people have an existence beyond their purchasing habits. Anyway, so, and I think I like to refer to them sometimes as an audience. I think that's a good one. I think an audience is a more humane description of people. They're people that are there that want to be, you know, entertained or engaged, and I think that's a little more useful. But anyway, I digress. So you'll probably hear me say user journey maps a few times in this slide deck. A customer journey is a set of interactions a customer has with your business to complete a task such as evaluating, onboarding, getting support, or renewing a product or service. The customer journey map is a visualization of an individual's relationships with a product and brand over time and across different channels, and of course, touch points. So that's a kind of involved way of saying it. Basically, user journey map is just a graphical depiction of the journey a person makes, discovering your service or your product or service, researching it, purchasing it, and then getting support for it, and then recommending it to other people. That's kind of generally the gist of it. But to make it useful as a tool for talking to your clients. It's really good for you to point out, you know, where where the people looking for your product or service are running into trouble, you know, where the pain points are, points of friction, where there's opportunities to have a better brand experience with them. That's where these documents become super useful. You know, I think I've said before, and I'll mention this again during the slide deck, is that, you know, a lot of time we have the challenge with dealing with clients is they often think about the way they do things inside their company, and they give things names, and you know there's business rules and stuff like that that make sense to them because they're on the inside. But when they're exposed to the person using their website or buying their products, they don't know why it's like that, and it's confusing and problematic. So a lot of these kind of things that we do as experienced designers is to kind of get the client to shift their thinking from their internal sort of way of thinking about things to see how it looks from the outside. And I think even just as a designer, that's what you have to do if you're just designing a, you know, not just designing, but designing a brochure or something like that, or a poster. You know, the client will often want to like fill it with every piece of information they have, and you know it makes it and of course that satisfies their requirements because they want to communicate all this information. But you know, you have to look at it from somebody that's looking at this poster and going, well, they're not going to make any sense of this because just there's too much information on it. You can't kind of separate the data from the noise, right? So your job is to say like, okay, we got to cut back on some of this. We got to make it the most important information to the people that are viewing it. So, you know, I think that this kind of process happens not just in design that's related to technology, but it also happens in traditional kind of design practices. Um, and I think this is what I just said. It exposes the gaps between the user's expectations and the perceptions of key steps in the journey with the associated stakeholders. So, you know, it's just a way of abstracting things a little bit to make it clearer for the client to understand. And it's a tool that you can use for helping guide the project in a way that will be more successful from the perspective of uh, a human using their product, service, or website. A customer journey map often represents as a timeline of all touch points between a user and a product. This timeline contains information about all channels that the users use to interact with a product that typically involves breaking down traditional system, department, and channel silos to unify and automate the customer engagement process. Cross-channel customer context is collected and analyzed to support continuous optimization of the customer experience over time. Well, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? Um, you know, to summarize what this is saying is you're creating a timeline, and that timeline is being used to kind of indicate where there's key opportunities to improve the brand relationship with the client, with the customer, with the end client, with the customer. Um, and it, you know, a lot of times, like think about it. You know, we were talking about this in our talk about touch points and channels. You know, a lot of the times, what's missing is connection between the different touch points, right? The you go to use one touch point. Let's say you do a chat online with customer service, and but then you need to call them, and the person on the other line has no idea what you chatted to the previous person about. You know, it's not a seamless experience. So a lot of things that we're trying to do here with this is try to create a seamless transition between touch points, and that's usually limited and hindered by the technology that the client is using. They might use one piece of software for their chat, and they might use a different kind of client um, database for their phone calls, and those two things don't talk to each other. And that's very common, um, you know, to have technical kind of baked in technological challenges because I think everybody does want to create a seamless experience. So here's just a graphic of a super high level, you know, user journey map. And this is sort of like the DNA, like the bare essence of what it is. Now, what I'm going to expect from you for your assignments is obviously more than this. We need to break down kind of each one of those steps into particular moments that we can kind of parse apart and figure out, you know, what's going on from the client's perspective, or sorry, from the consumer's perspective. Consumers are increasingly empowered by competition, digital channels, and easy access to information, such as their devices becoming more and more integrated and connected to your business and systems via the web, self-service, and mobile apps. The customer's buying cycle starts long before the visit to the website, and the service and support experience continues long after they place their order. So, the gist of what this is saying is that, things were different in a pre-digital age. There was less touch points, and there was almost no feedback at any of those touch points. It was all one way. It was unidirectional. So, you had mass advertising, customer buys the product, you know, they very rarely were able to contact you again for in terms of support. So there wasn't very much kind of in terms of two-way communication unless you picked up a phone and called them about something. But with the digital world, that kind of two-way communication has become much, much easier and expected. This digital disruption is making customer experience a priority and shifting business focus from traditional systems of record to dynamic systems of engagement. Companies that fail to take the full buying cycle into account commonly underdeliver on customer expectations. Thus, the businesses are forced to reinvent themselves to increase customer value and deliver great experiences by refactoring systems and processes to constantly support the customers on these new touch points. What this is essentially saying is that businesses need to get better at creating systems that can follow the customers through the whole process of the user journey. Um, and traditional businesses are much slower to adapt to this. It's taking them longer and longer to kind of, not longer and longer, it's taken them a long time to kind of adapt to the new reality of the digital world. Whereas like new startup businesses are often right from the get-go, they're very much in tune with their social media presence and having like a good, customer funnel that and purchase process that is seamless and easy to use. But more traditional companies have suffered because of it. You have like big companies like Sears that are closing, and they used to be, back in the olden days, they were the ones that kind of championed the purchasing stuff by catalog, which, if you think about it, is a perfect analog to what Amazon is today. They dominated that, and then they never innovated and never kind of caught back up when they were replaced by new digital companies that were very good at this. User journey maps often serve as the foundation for UX optimization programs, identifying new ways to help your customers reach their goals while still delivering on the company's objectives. So, it's often a great tool to do a journey map to look at where a company is right now and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and where there's kind of opportunities for improvement. One of the primary discovery tools employed to better understand your customers' interaction with the company, these journey maps should be data-driven and sourced both from customers and direct results, such as customer interviews, observations, and web analytics. What they're saying there is that, it's like I said, I've said this in the past, it's not always easy to get user research done when you're engaged on a project, but you should try your best to get as much relevant data that you can to help inform the user journey map so that you're not just making stuff up. Like I said, it's not always that easy. Usually the best you can do, and not even that, is you get web analytics, which are basically the records of how many people have visited your site and where they've jumped in and where they've jumped off. And you can infer from that where, at least on the level of a website, where people might be having problems, with certain aspects of the site. Inside out to outside in. Okay, this is like super important. I was talking about it earlier. I just want to say it again because maybe with reiteration, it'll stick with you. Clients often have a very different view about what needs to be done to make their business successful, and they're often very blind to what consumers need to want to use that business or buy their products or services. And it's very strange that this happens. I can kind of see how it works, but this is more often than not. Like most of the time when you're talking to a client, they're actually strangely unaware of the trouble that customers are having with their user experience with the brand. So the inside out is when people inside the company are dictating the way, the way that they're dictating the way that they think the user experience should go based on their knowledge. And like I said, they're often very, very wrong about that. The outside in is when you look at the user and get their kind of unfiltered view of the user experience when dealing with this company and their product and service that they're trying to deliver. That's the way you get the best information about how to um, improve the experience for the company. So just to reiterate, your job as a UX designer is to be a user advocate and to push your clients to empathize with the end user. And that sounds very aggressive, but that's what you have to do. You often are going to fail. You're not going to be able to do it completely, but if you can move that needle a little bit, it will help overall in the long run. I just completed a project with Green Shield for a site they have called Sure Health, and it was a battle redoing their UX. It was a huge, huge battle, and we had to, everything we tried, we couldn't do everything we wanted to do. We had to pull back many times because it's just the client will only let you go so far. But we designed, built, produced the site, went live, and the first month they got a 25% improvement in sales, um, which validates in terms of the approach we had about going like just bringing it back to the user. It's like, I know you're trying to sell insurance and you guys know a lot about it, but the end user does not know a lot about insurance, so you have to present this in a different way. You have to split it up into little easy to understand chunks and focus on what are the differences between your plans and not get bogged down in kind of the details of it. So you know what, we were successful. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we got enough, and they're super happy because their site is performing really, really well and they're getting more sales. Pain points and friction. We've already talked about this last semester. This is the very basic essence of what you're trying to do as a UX designer is you're trying to remove pain points or friction or in some cases cognitive load. A pain point describes a moment in a customer's experience that causes frustration, emotional discomfort, irritation, or hassle, which are the critical touch points encountered along his or her customer journey. Even badly managed touch point that is not designed in keeping with the brand leaves the customer with a negative experience, so it becomes a pain point, which means that the overall customer experience turns negative. So, there's many, many points of friction, but you can kind of summarize them into these four main points of friction. All the rest kind of fall under the umbrella of these four. One is financial, so cost. Um, Whenever you're purchasing something, cost can be a huge factor in whether people think what they're getting is of value. For the example I have here, and this is, I think, one we've all experienced, is when you go through the whole purchase process of something, you're kind of happy, it's the right price, and then you get to the checkout, and suddenly you discover there's a $20 delivery fee or even higher, and you're like, what? And like that's when a lot of people are going to drop out of the process when they get a surprise. Maybe if they knew about it before, maybe if you told them how much the shipping was going to be before they got to that point, they'd be prepared for it and they could make that decision. But the surprise of getting that number at the end is going to make them drop off. Um, Cognitive load. Was called process, but I don't think the process is the right word. So, cognitive load, we already talked about that. The prospect is spending too much time and energy on completing a task, and they prefer to complete it with greater efficiency. So anything that makes them think too much or work too hard is a point of friction. The purchasing process. If the customer has difficulty in the purchasing process, they will leave for a competitor that makes it easier. So if the whole process of trying to purchase something online is complicated or not clear, or you thought you filled in the form right and you hit next and it said you got to fill in all the form fields and you can't find the form field that wasn't filled in, that's a purchasing process issue. So it's not even just purchasing, it's like any kind of process. If there's anything, any part of the transactional nature of your site is broken or doesn't work the way you expect it to, that is a point of friction. And support. So this is like if you know the user that's using your product or service, if they don't if they don't get the kind of support they're looking for um, at at each stage of their customer journey, that that will be a pain point as well. That'll be a point of friction. And support doesn't always necessarily mean like, telephone computer support where you have, something you bought something and it doesn't work properly and so you want to talk to it. It means just support along the journey. So like just say you need more information to make the right purchase decision. Just say you need to um, you don't think you don't know if the blue color is the right color on the web and you just want some more information about it. Anything like that, like anything that helps support you in your purchasing pipeline, um, would be considered a support issue. And we talked about Apple and how like they have optimized their they have created rules and books for their employees to read so that they stay true to the brand promise when they're talking to their customers. Like that's probably the pinnacle of, of this kind of idea of creating a consistent brand experience across touch points. So now we're going to go into creating journey maps. Sorry about the recording today. I'm in the office and there's a few people in here and two dogs. So you're going to hear some barking from time to time. I apologize. Um, so creating journey maps. There's six steps in creating a journey map. Define your persona. Define your customer phases. Talk about that in a sec. Identify touch points. Conduct research. Identify points of friction and resolve. So let's go over those quickly. So, if you're designing a user journey map, it's always good to, you'll see some user journey maps that don't have personas. They're not always on there. But I think it's good to have a persona because the journey that one person might take might be different than a journey another person might take. So, the journey somebody that's not tech savvy may may take may be quite a bit different than somebody that is tech savvy. Somebody that's not tech savvy may rely more on telephone support and stuff like that as they go through the journey. Maybe they go into the store, they don't use the website. Somebody that's tech savvy will be, researching stuff on websites and talking to people on social media about it, and maybe doing the whole purchase transaction through a website. So they could be two completely different views of the customer journey. So then the next step is to define your customer phases. These are kind of similar across the bar. Like one thing I'll tell you about customer journey maps is they're all different. They're all like any customer journey map I've seen from any UX person has looked very, very different, and they all kind of do everything in different sort of ways. And so the phases are like the the kind of the major kind of groupings of steps in the user journey, and they're generally speaking the same, but they can be different. We'll kind of go over the kind of the most common ones. Yours and your user journey might be a little bit different. Don't worry about that. Each stage represents a major goal your customer is trying to achieve in their overall journey. You should build a customer journey map with stages that represent your customer's goal-oriented journey, not the internal process steps. So that once again is talking about like not following what your direct client thinks the process steps are, because they're going to be different for them than they are for the end user. So hang on. If we look at a typical customer life cycle, these are the kind of the steps you're going to see all the time. So discover or discovery, explore, comparison, evaluate, purchase, retention, and referrals. Um, discover could be called the research phase. It's all kind of the same. Or explore is the research phase. So discovery is when you first hear about the product or service. This could be through mass advertising, etc. Explore is when you're kind of looking in more detail about the product or service. Comparison is like when you're shopping around and like say you're looking for a TV and you look at the Samsung over here and the LG over there and you kind of compare them and try to figure out which has the best features for the best price point. Evaluate So make your decision on the product or service that you're purchasing. Um, Make the purchase itself. Retention is like how the company tries to keep you loyal to the brand, and referrals is, hopefully you enjoyed the brand experience so much you told your friends about it and they went and bought the same thing. So, important note for journey maps produced in class this semester, I want you to focus more on the touch points on your device and interface and less on the kind of acquisition and retention portion. So, what I mean by that, I'll be giving you your assignment in a bit, um, is you can kind of zoom into any one of these sections a lot, or you can just treat it in a very, very basic way. So, you know, in the research phase and the discovery phase, uh, you could just identify that as like, customer goes to the website. But you could actually zoom right into that and go into like, what's the experience of the customer using the website, on a very kind of granular level, and where are the pain points in that, right? And so zoom level is important. I want you to kind of focus your zoom level on the customer interaction with the product itself and where those touch points are represented. So what I'm saying here is like, don't worry as much about being super detailed on like the acquisition and the kind of like those kind of parts, or the kind of, awareness parts of it. Those can be kind of general, but I would like some level of detail and some level of zoom on the touch points in using the product itself. Identify touch points. Consumer touch points are your brand's points of customer contact from start to finish. For example, a customer may find your business online or in an ad, see ratings or reviews, visit your website, shop at your retail store, or contact your customer service. This seems like a long list, but these are just a few of the touch points. Identifying your touch points is an important step towards creating a customer journey map and making sure your customers are satisfied every step of the way. I just included one here. This is a super basic uh, customer journey map. I think that this would be good as kind of a starting point, but not as an end product of a customer journey map, because it's kind of missing detail, right? So this is one I think it's similar to one I showed you in the touch points. So this, really lays out in, in detail all the potential touch points for this particular product, and it shows, the different stages, the awareness, consideration, purchase, etc., and how those touch points relate to those different parts of the user journey. Um, I think I showed this one a couple weeks ago. I liked it because it had the digital touch points at the top and the physical touch points at the bottom, and it also managed to indicate unmanaged touch points, which are ones that aren't controlled by your company. So, like third-party sites reviewing your product, you can't control that, but you have to consider a touch point because that's still where people will have an experience with your brand, even if you can't control it. So the other important thing to do is to conduct research. So we talked about this. You're going to be the one thing is you're going to be kind of limited with your assignment in conducting research because we're still in COVID, and some of the products that you guys are working with don't really exist, so you're not going to be able to get a ton of information on it. So you're gonna have to wing it a little bit. That's okay. But in the real world, you want to try to grab as much kind of research as possible. Um, for each stage of the journey, try to identify what were the goals, what were they trying to achieve, what did they expect the process to be like, the steps, the touch points they used to complete that stage, how did they feel emotionally during each touch point experience and why, other thoughts they had during the stage, and how long did it take to complete. Once you've understood the persona's goals and written down their touch points, it's time to look at the big picture, the totality of the experience with your company. Every business will look through the lens of their customers' personas differently. Walking through the journey map stages with your team will help you identify any points of friction within the customer experience. Of course, every business is different and you need to know your customers best. There are a few example questions below to get you started. Where could friction appear in this particular touch point? Are people abandoning purchases because of this? Are customers not aware of the solution that you've already provided? If so, why not? And the final step is resolve. Journey maps aren't meant to be purely illustrative. A typical exercise should identify a few quick fixes, including opportunities to boost enjoyment and improve the journey. And of course, most firms discover the process helps drive broader customer experience improvements as customer needs are better understood and met. In brief, mapping and journey should help lead to specific actions that improve the experience and drive the ROI. ROI is return on investment, if you didn't know. Treat your map as a living document to be revisited regularly and updated as required, and remember to share it with any relevant stakeholders. So, part of this is there should be action that comes out of a user journey in terms of where you've identified a weakness, and there should be an attempt to try to fix it. And they're also kind of saying that it should be a living document so that it gets updated on a regular basis as you try to kind of tune the experience for users. And let's just look at a couple of user journey maps. What's good, the bad, and the ugly. This one's good. It's got a persona at the top, emotional Eric. This is the persona that we're kind of looking at here. And it's, relatively, it's a little light on the detail, I think, personally. It lists kind of the different touch points in there. They're numbered and they're broken down into each kind of section. So consider, explore, compare, test, negotiate. You can see how those breakdowns are going to be different for different products and different services. I do like the line at the bottom that has quotes. Wow, that website looks great for car shopping. You can also see that there's friction points in there. So this mobile app is missing a lot of features. So I think that's kind of cool. That's a personal touch. My one problem is that those word balloons, it's not clear which ones are like friction, which ones are touch points, and which are where there's points of friction. You kind of have to read them all. I guess they're all kind of frictiony. Anyway, it seems a little bit light to me. This one is more robust, probably more than you would need to do for this project. I do like the way it's kind of broken out into clearer sections. You have this kind of experience line that's supposed to kind of indicate how the customer is feeling across the journey. This is useful. I don't think it's not based on math or numbers or metrics. It's kind of made up a little bit, but it gives you an overall kind of understanding of how the customer is feeling through all the different points. So this one is a little bit weak on really calling out all the touch points. It's broken down into word of mouth, traditional media, et cetera, but I don't know, it's not super clear. Like I think that this one does a better job of kind of graphically showing you all of them. I do like the quotes at the bottom. This one seems kind of dry and difficult to read. So there is a place definitely in for design and making these things kind of engaging and interesting. If it looks too much like a spreadsheet, it's difficult. It's difficult to follow or stay interested in. So this one's kind of a crazy one. I think it's interesting. This is actually about like visitors coming to a site, so it's a little bit different. It's nothing to do directly with kind of digital application in particular, except that maybe you might go on a website to look up this site. It's interesting the way they kind of have the customer journey, going into a circle in the actual museum. Yeah, I think it's kind of fun and an engaging way to represent it. I think it's kind of creative. I definitely rather look at this than this, even though it is a little bit overwhelming as well. And this one's pretty neat looking, but once again, very different. So I think one of the things you should take away from this is there's not one particular way to kind of do a user journey map. There's many, and I think you should choose the user journey map that fits to the thing that you're actually working on. So I think that like the customer journey map for a location that you visit is going to be different than sort of like an online grocery store. It's going to be different for shopping for a new car. You know, they're all kind of different approaches. Okay, let's get into the assignment. The purpose of this assignment is to create a customer journey map identifying all touch points and key moments in the experience related to your chosen emerging tech UX. A customer journey map is a visual representation of the process a customer or prospect goes through to achieve a goal. With the help of a customer journey map, you can get a sense of your customer's motivations, their needs, pain points, and moments throughout this journey. A journey unfolds one moment at a time. These moments occur in many contexts and with different intensities of emotion. Booking an online ticket, checking in at the airport, using an entertainment system, checking bags. Track these moments closely because they shed light on the barriers and also the opportunities for design and change. Each moment constitutes an opportunity for an organization to clarify its relevance and provide value through information and interaction. So the requirements for this is collect data from possible customers or people as much as possible during COVID. Define your persona and their goals. Define stages of your customer journey. Add your customer actions, thinking, and emotions. Define key highlights and pain points. Identify touch points, moments, and key pivots. Pivots are when um, you know when you have to react quickly and change the way you're thinking. So a key pivot might be a way of preventing you from losing a customer from a bad interaction. Write down what you can do to improve, prioritize, and execute changes. So there are a ton of journey maps online. Please use them for inspiration. If you just do a search for a customer journey map, you're going to get like thousands of Google image results. But I do want to make it clear, I want this to be your own version and your own vision, and be creative. This is kind of a fun one to some degree. It shouldn't be an exercise in um, necessarily being too research heavy and too didactic. It should also be creative and eye-catching and something the client wants to look at and engage with. Anyway, if you have any questions about it, I'll have a sync session next week and we can talk about that. Otherwise, you can always set up a one-on-one meeting with me, and I encourage you to do that, like I said, throughout the semester. Anytime you have a question, just hit me up with a one-on-one. And further to that, I'll apologize. A few students had trouble booking a meeting with me last week. Um, I was super busy with my other business. Um, Please don't get frustrated. Just try to book me the next week. There's no time limit on these meetings. Like I said, I hope this doesn't happen, but you could do all your one-on-one meetings a couple weeks before the end of school if you wanted to. The only problem with that is you'll miss out on your midterm marks. Um, that being said, thank you for listening to my lecture, and it's taco time.